It's nice to be back here, actually. I've been here 3 or 4 times when I was training as an analyst. I used to come up for their lectures and going to the Zinger Club or something in Cambridge University. They have wonderful lectures on psychology there. Zangwill. And so I'd make a day out of it to immerse myself in psychology. So it's nice to be back, and I was most impressed by the society here, especially I always remembered the library. So I brought a book along to donate to you, my book, if you will accept it.
Thank you.
Okay. I'd like to thank you all for coming out tonight in this cold weather, and to Jane for being here to welcome me, and also Judy for making the tea. Thank you very much indeed. And of course Richard. So I was quite relieved actually that it didn't start at 7 sharp, because the train was delayed for 45 minutes.
Oh God.
And I was a bit anxious, but I thought, oh, that's nice that it doesn't start bang on 7. And then Richard started talking about Ulysses, and I remember a friend of mine who could have been from Ulysses. I was having a pint with him one day about time, and I said, how's your day? He said, terrible, terrible. I had this man Russian shouting at me this morning. He worked as a clerk in a shipping company. I said, really, what happened? He said, well, the ship's captain said to me last night, be at the docks at 7 o'clock in the morning to check the manifesto. He said, well, I arrived a little bit late, not too late, close enough to 7, 8ish. But anyway, your man, the captain, he goes berserk at me. And I realised, as he was yapping and shouting, I realised he was really serious when he said 7 o'clock. And then he sipped his pint and he said, you're probably a bloody KGB agent anyway. And that was the concept of time, and I like it, that we don't have to be too rigid on it. So tonight what I'm going to do is to talk about Jung, psychedelics, spirituality, and I'm going to focus on 2 nuggets of research that I came across. Serendipity would be the word, that I didn't expect to come across. And they're interlinked. The first one was coming across letters from a student of Jung, and also Bill Wilson, that showed that Carl Jung was actually in favour of the group method when applied to what he called the great number of neurotics after the Second World War. Most people believe that, he was totally anti-group because he'd seen the Nuremberg rallies and stuff like that. No, he was fully open to it. And he actually advised the students on how to set up and establish groups similar to AA. So hence today, I don't know, there might be 200 groups similar to AA, particularly Al-Anon and Aware, and Debtors Anonymous, and Shoppers Anonymous, and Sex Anonymous, and just about every type. And I think we may overcome for those 12-step groups. So that's one point. That was a nugget I came across. And some people who are writing about Jung and groups are quite happy to hear this, that there is actually some written acknowledgement that he was in favour of groups. But the most important point tonight that I came across that I didn't expect to was in New York in the archives. I was reading a letter from Bill Wilson, the co-founder of Alcoholics Anonymous, to Anelia Yaffe. And she said to him, thank you, Carl Jung intended to answer your letter, but he got a little bit sick. And I thought, well, he did actually answer Bill Wilson's first letter. So I asked, was there a second letter by any chance? And they said, yes. I said, oh, great, this is wonderful news. Can you let me have it, please? And I said, no. I said, but you're an open society. Your secrets will make you sick and all this. You're going to keep it from me. He said, no, we're not letting you have it. So I said, well, what is it? He said, well, it's a 3-page letter, but we can't tell you the contents. So I was there and I was scratching my head and I was thinking, okay. So Bill Wilson's home was in upstate New York, Stepping Stones it was called. And they have their own archives. So the next day I went up there and I casually asked, I said, could I have that letter, the second letter that Bill wrote to Jung? And the archivist went down the stairs and up she came with the letter. But as she came up, she just glanced through it and she stopped. And I was there, I knew I was getting to the Holy Grail almost. And she stopped and said, oh, sir, I can't give you the third page. I can only give you the first 2 pages. So, okay. So I said, can you tell me what was in the third page? Medical matters. And I said, okay, medical matter. Was it to do with LSD? And she said, I can't tell you that. And that was the end of it. Yeah. So anyway, I was then heading off to Akron, Ohio, where the second co-founder of AA was Dr. Bob. Unfortunately enough, the archivist was going on holiday, and she put me in touch with a friend of hers, and I casually asked him, because I knew he had a good innings with the headquarters of AA, did he have this second letter? Because I missed it. And by return, he sent it to me. And I said nothing. So, thank you very much. So it was by a slip. So certain privileged people get the letter. I have it here tonight to show you, and it's 3 slides. So it looks terribly built up to read it, but you know it's worth reading it just to show that Bill Wilson was actually in favour, very much so, of inducing people who had alcohol problems but were in denial into a transcendent experience. And so he wrote to Carl Jung about this, and we can tell you, I'll tell you towards the end what Carl Jung's response might have been. And I suppose why I'm intertwining the groups and Carl Jung's response, because seemingly Carl Jung was flexible enough to see the benefits of groups, and I wonder, would he have been flexible enough to see any benefits in the use of LSD in treating alcoholics who cannot gain a spiritual aspect of the Alcoholics Anonymous program? And indeed, as someone who works with people with alcohol problems for over 20 years, many a time I've sat in front of somebody and I said, you know, would you be prepared to consider the AA program? They said, no, that's all to do with religion. I said, well, let's forget the religious aspect. If it would save your life, would you be prepared to consider it? And they say, I promise you, no, I'd prefer to die. Particularly professional barristers, surgeons, and some other professions, but they would sit there and say, I would prefer to die rather than submit to a religious program. So, I would now begin, if I may. So what I want to do, first of all, is to look at the definitions of alcoholism. And the good thing about talking about addiction, particularly alcoholism, is everybody's got an interest in it. Everybody's got somebody who has a problem. And if you're a clinician, you'll certainly have encountered people who present with the problem of alcoholism. It may be under the disguise of anything up to 80 different medical problems, ranging from a large heart, liver problems, tingling, headaches, whatever. But they see their doctors, and the doctors never identify the source of the problem as being alcoholism, in my experience. So we look for a definition. The DSM. Now, first definition that appeared in the DSM in 1952, I think, was that it was thought by the medical community to be a symptom of deeper psychological disorder or moral weakness. They called it moral turpitude, meaning that a person caused their own problem because they consumed the alcohol themselves. So the first edition of the DSM grouped alcohol and drug abuse under sociopathic personality disorders. So you can imagine if you had an alcohol problem in the early 50s in America or England, and we're going to see a medical professional who had their little book that told them sociopathic personality disorder. Now, I'm not saying there are not sociopaths amongst alcoholics. Certainly there are. But to group everybody under that heading was certainly not conducive to a person entering any form of relationship with a medical professional or treatment centre. DSM-4, 1994, decided they would divide alcoholism into alcohol dependence and alcohol abuse. Now, alcohol abuse, you will see many students abusing alcohol, but it doesn't mean they're alcoholics. They will get a mortgage, a partner, and go on into a profession, grow out of it. That would be alcoholic abuse, only lasts for a short period of time. Some people will go on to become dependent. The other section of people who actually abuse alcohol are senior citizens. They lose their partner, they begin to drink heavily to replace the partner. People diagnose it as alcoholism. It's not. It's just going through a temporary grieving process and displacing the grieving. So not to be confused with alcoholism. So alcohol abuse it's got some relevance, but unfortunately some people will think, who are alcoholics think, I'm just an alcohol abuser, I'm not really dependent. So you need 3 or more of the following symptoms over 12 months: tolerance, withdrawals, larger amounts, drinking larger amounts than intended, attempts to control it, a lot of time spent drinking. I don't pay too much attention to these because as a clinician, you might pick up some pointers, but when you have a client in front of you, if you try and ask them, do you drink larger amounts than intended, they usually say, like everybody else, Christmas and things like that. Do you spend a lot of time drinking? Oh, no, not usually. I mean, I'm out at the pub every night by 11:30, just from 5 o'clock to 11:30. Are your activities reduced? Oh, no, shall I do the crossword in the pub? And do you continue drinking despite adverse consequences? No, there's no adverse consequences. The wife thinks there's adverse consequences and the job thinks there's adverse consequences, but I've no problem drinking. I'm able to continue drinking. So it's very difficult to get honest answers from people who are alcoholics because it is, they say, one of the only illnesses that tells the person they haven't got it. So it's a bit like someone coming in with a broken leg, flicking it around and telling you they're going to run the marathon for 25 miles, and you go, oh really? You've actually got a broken leg? No, it's all that'll be mended in a day or two. So, alcohol abuse, problematic use without compulsive use, significant tolerance or withdrawal, that would even be confusing for me. And with a client, it would be difficult to put somebody into that category. But it basically means, think of the average student who binge drinks away from home for the first time, but they don't have a compulsion to drink maybe first thing in the morning, though they may. World Health Organization defined alcoholism as characterized by impaired control over drinking, frequent episodes of intoxication and preoccupation with alcohol and the use of alcohol despite adverse consequences. That's one to remember, that the adverse consequences, that they still continue drinking even though the drink has caused the adverse consequences, might be getting sacked from the job, it might be losing their driving license, it might be their partner leaving them, but they won't connect the two. And that's why it is, I see it as an illness, a psychological illness, a lot to do with denial. And that's a real defense mechanism and a Freudian defense mechanism. Terminology has led to confusion, both within the medical and psychological community and within the general public, because many partners will consider that their partner has an alcohol problem. They might encourage the partner to go into a treatment centre or to stop drinking, to abstain. But believe it or not, come Christmas, the person most likely to say to the alcoholic, have a drink as a reward, is the very partner who screamed at them to get into treatment. That's a phenomenon that happens and it's to do with people being more comfortable when the alcoholic is actually drinking alcoholically and creating disturbances, because then they have a role as the angel or whatever. But the most dangerous person to bring an alcoholic back from abstinent drinking is their partner. That is 9 out of 10 times. And even though I forewarn some partners, and I say, well, how did it happen that you gave him a drink of wine with his Christmas dinner? I thought he deserved it. So the DSM-5 integrated concept of alcohol abuse and alcohol dependence and described it as alcohol use disorder, and it has listed 11 criteria. Very similar to all the other ones. Unsuccessful efforts to cut down, not fulfilling major obligations, continuing to drink despite legal, social, family consequences, drinking more to get the same effect as before, tolerance, perhaps taking tranquilizers to release or avoid, or to relieve or avoid the symptoms of hangovers. But again, I won't dwell on those, but you get the general idea. Now, some years ago, it was realized it was very difficult to get a definition of alcoholism. So the National Council of Alcoholism and the American Society of Addiction Medicine combined together for a 2-year study to come up with a definition of alcoholism. Can you imagine it? Can you imagine it? I would still say the most likely person to give you a good definition of who is alcoholic on the street is the street gossip. You look out behind the window to him, her, him. They know instinctively. But anyway, they got the medical people together for 2 years, 23 of them, 2-year study, definition of alcoholism. Goal was to create a definition that was scientifically valid, clinically useful, and understandable by the general public. Now, if I seem cynical, please forgive me, because I think they came up with a pretty good definition. I think they came up with a working definition.